Good day, my name is Dan Rominsky, and for the last 6 years I've been traveling the greater Cleveland area, sharing stories of Cleveland's rich history. Within that history is a most fascinating character by the name of John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller not only being Cleveland's most famous character, but probably one of the most famous characters worldwide, even today. Many people are fascinated by the facts that surround John D. Rockefeller, which we hope to share with you this afternoon. Much is not discussed about his family and where he was from. John D. Rockefeller initially was from the state of New York. His mother was Eliza Davidson, and she was a strict Baptist, and she taught Rockefeller the ability of charity and frugality, and the ability to manage money, and gave him a great work ethic. His father, William Avery Rockefeller, was really just the opposite. William Avery was a medicine man, going about the country selling potions that would cure anything from a hangnail to cancer. Interesting to note that the basis of one of those potions was petroleum. Little did John D. Rockefeller know that his entire future would be based in the petroleum industry and would allow him to become the first billionaire. William Avery was also a horse thief and was not to be admired. He basically got into trouble with the law up in New York, and he migrated to Cleveland, Ohio when John D. Rockefeller and his two brothers and two sisters were very young. The Rockefellers migrated from Strongsville, Ohio to Parma, Ohio. And later, John D. Rockefeller was put into the country's first high school, Central High School, by his father. His father did believe in education, and John D. and brother William were put into the school and stayed at a boarding house. John D. Rockefeller thus had to be very independent at a very early age. John D. Rockefeller's father was gone for long periods of time, and John D. then became the head of the household. And as a result, he was given much responsibility. Early on, he was instructed by his father to build the first family home, which was in Cleveland, Ohio, and basically was a brick home of wonderful proportions. John D. had access to a checkbook, and he went ahead and supervised and built a wonderful home. His sister Lucy admired it from the very beginning and said John D. was utmost in every detail. When William Avery came home, he was pleasantly surprised at the great success that John D. Rockefeller had. Rockefeller, after school, married his high school sweetheart, a gal by the name of Laura Spellman. She was known as SETI to the family. John D. Rockefeller never did anything quickly, and they did not marry till age 25. And by the way, you might be interested in that fact that they honeymooned in none other than Niagara Falls. John D. Rockefeller in the petroleum industry bought up a lot of refineries, which led to a monopoly. His early partner was none other than Samuel Andrews. Andrews was a brilliant chemist, and he created many of the products from petroleum that were later sold by Standard Oil. Now, eventually, John D. Rockefeller grew and formed Standard Oil at about 1870. What many people are unaware of is that he had several partners, and these names are not as well known. His first partner was William, his younger brother. The other partner was a fellow by the name of Henry Flagler. If you've ever visited Florida, you may be very familiar with the Flagler name, as he built railroads and settled much of Florida. The third partner was a fellow by the name of Stephen Harkness. And Harkness had money and funded Standard Oil from the beginning. And then, of course, the fifth partner still was none other than Samuel Andrews. Early on, Andrews and Rockefeller had a falling out. And Andrews tried to bluff Rockefeller and said, if you give me $1 million, I'm out of here. He never thought that Rockefeller could come up with the money. It was kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke. One learns that you never bluff John D. Rockefeller, and in 2 days, Rockefeller put a check for $1 million on Andrews' desk. Now, Andrews went on and became a multimillionaire, but throughout life, Andrews thought he got the better of that deal. What's very interesting is if you look at the other partners, they became worth $250 million each. Andrews indeed did not get the best of the deal. Andrews' brilliance led to other jobs, and he never had to worry, and he did die a millionaire. One of the things about Rockefeller that you may not be aware of is as he went into retirement, he became the most hated man in America. This began to show up physically. He contracted a disease called alopecia. And that disease, if you're not familiar, is a disease where you lose every hair on your body. When you look at pictures of Rockefeller, you see him well-groomed with a marvelous set of hair. Those were wigs. Rockefeller had over 100 wigs, which were very carefully laundered and hidden from the public. We have very few pictures of Rockefeller in his true baldness. A fact about Rockefeller that definitely most people are unaware of is that he loved to play golf, of all things. Rockefeller had a home in Cleveland, actually a 700-acre estate called Forest Hills, which was in our suburbs of both East Cleveland and Cleveland Heights. It was like a gentleman farm, for Rockefeller and his family loved to be out in the country. As part of that estate, they had a 9-hole golf course, and Rockefeller embraced golf, and when he retired, he played every day. The estate was a summer estate, and the Rockefellers would leave and go to New York at summer's end. Rockefeller had a famous foursome that he played with, and among that foursome was a fellow by the name of Hamilton Bigger. Hamilton Bigger was a homeopathic doctor and Rockefeller's personal physician, and he played with Rockefeller most days of the summer. Rockefeller was so enthralled with golf that he approached Bigger and he said, "What must I do so that you and I can play golf on our 100th birthday?" Bigger, being a homeopathic doctor, put Rockefeller on a strict diet. Part of that diet, of all things, was barley water and milk. Oddly enough, Bigger died in his late 80s, and Rockefeller was very disappointed in his doctor that he did not live up to his end of the bargain. John D. himself died just short of his 98th birthday in 1937. He did play golf up to 94, not playing a full 9 holes, but playing 4 holes, suggesting I'd rather play 4 good holes than 9 bad holes. John D. Rockefeller is oftentimes questioned in terms of his loyalty to Cleveland. I think the matter is settled by the fact that John D. Rockefeller and his wife, Seti, are both buried in Cleveland, Ohio, in our Lakeview Cemetery. There is a gigantic monument there that proves this fact. If you go to the cemetery, you may encounter a little grave with the name of Alice. Alice was John D. Rockefeller's youngest daughter and died in infancy, and one of the only children of Rockefellers buried at Lakeview Cemetery. Many people suggest that John D. Rockefeller was driven out of Cleveland due to tax issues. There was a tax issue, a property tax issue, which was later settled, and John D. Rockefeller never paid a penny. The true note of John D. Rockefeller's loyalty to Cleveland is when his son, John D. Rockefeller II, suggested that John D. and his mother be buried in New York. John D. was very frank with his son and said, "Our home is Cleveland, Ohio, and Mother and I will be buried in Lakeview Cemetery." So I'm hopeful that you've learned a few things about John D. Rockefeller this afternoon that were not obvious to you. We still regard him as our most famous citizen, and the remnants left from Rockefeller are a building on our public square with the name of Rockefeller on the roof. We also have a wonderful park, which was known as Rockefeller Park and is still today. I hope you'll come and visit Cleveland, Ohio again. I thank Gilmore Academy for giving us this wonderful backdrop to use today. And with that, I thank you so very much.